Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. Necromorphs, the terrifying mutated monsters in Dead Space. Horror games are characterized by a kick-ass enemy, one that is unique and scary at the same time. If you're a fan of survival horror games, chances are that you're familiar with Dead Space, one of the jewels in the crown of this genre. This sci-fi survival horror game takes you into the dark world of Issac Clarke, an engineer aboard a space mining ship. When they find themselves in the terrifying world of the Necromorphs, all they can do is find a way to survive the nightmarish aberrations. The Necromorphs are some sort of mutated corpses that have strange new forms due to an extraterrestrial infection. These monsters are incredibly aggressive and they'll attack anyone uninfected because their sole purpose is to acquire more bodies to spread the infection. What adds to their deadly nature is just how durable and sturdy these creatures are. You literally have to rip them apart to defeat them, and they keep coming throughout the gameplay. In the course of the game, you'll face a wide variety of necromorphs, and you have to find a way to defeat them all. Some of these monstrous creatures were stronger than the others, but almost all of them were incredibly grotesque and creepy. In this video, we bring you the entire collection of necromorphs that you can encounter in Dead Space. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Hive Mind. This necromorph was created almost 200 years before the events of the game, and it was a result of military experiments gone wrong. When the end result proved to be too dangerous to be used as a weapon, the hive mind was made to retreat into the underground cave system for the next 2 decades. When a mining company found the planet and conducted illegal mining activities, they unearthed the menace. This started the first phase of a necromorph outbreak, and slowly the members of the mining colony turned insane. When the hive mind was awakened again, it found new creatures to command, and this massive beast attacked anything that came near it. The hive mind looked like a giant worm, and it had several tentacles along its body. Some part of this monster was always hidden, but it was a massive structure created from multiple bodies. It had a circular mouth with 2 sets of jaws, and the creature could spit acidic pods from its mouth. It had 5 eyes made from yellow explosive fluid, and the hive mind could use its tentacles to crush the enemy. The player has to be extremely careful while trying to defeat this powerful beast. The Leviathan. We don't get to see much of this amorphous monster except its fleshy front. It has a wide gaping mouth and tentacles spring out of its body that it uses to attack. This massive creature can also attack with the organic bombs that it produces. The Leviathan was drifting through space when it found its way into the food storage facility of the USG Ishimura. The tracts of the corruption began spreading rapidly, and even the oxygen levels of the ship started to become critical. One of the main tricks to remember while facing the Leviathan is to never stop moving around.
Entering zero gravity.
The whole interaction takes place in zero gravity, and thus it is possible for Isaac to jump very high. While playing the game, you must find a way to hit the monster in its weak spot, and we found aiming above the tentacle to be a worthy tactic. Even when the Leviathan is near its death, another set of tentacles spawn, but they eventually die after the core mouth of the creature is killed. Guardian. This is one of those necromorphs that seem easy to deal with, but end up giving you a hard time. The Guardian is a combination of a morbidly mutated human body fused together with the corruption growing on the walls. During the initial stages of its transformation, the Guardian still has a few human characteristics, but slowly they just become a giant lump of entrails that seem to emerge from a cavity in the stomach of the host. Their purpose is to be the protector of the spaces that are important for the infestation. The Guardian is immobile and it can't hunt down its prey, so it sticks to the walls, and it can strike a fierce blow, killing those in immediate vicinity. It strikes with one of its lethal appendages, and it can deliver some extremely gory deaths. The decapitations are horrific, and Isaac has to find a way to clear this nuisance before he can proceed. If you're to have any chance of defeating this monster, you should figure out a way to sever the tentacles emerging from its chest cavity.
Plasma cutter? Oh my god!
Slasher. The slashers are one of the most common necromorph forms, and they're hardly much of a threat when they're alone. These creatures are created from one human corpse, and it gets its name from its mutated arms that resemble sharp blades. These blades are deadly, and the slasher uses it to hack away at its victims. The gamers can breathe easy if they're alone because of their lesser strength and slower reflexes than some of the other necromorphs. However, if they're in a group, the slashers can be a great threat. It has some morbid ways of killing its victims besides slashing through them. It can bite off their head or simply immobilize the victim with a toxic bile spit. There are a few different variants of slashers that you'll encounter along the way. For you to kill these monsters, you have to sever both its arms. These necromorphs might not have been the toughest of opponents, but their animalistic sounds made the gaming experience a lot scarier. Feeder. This skinny and grotesque necromorph is formed from humans who ingest necromorph-infected meat. The feeder has an incredibly skinny appearance, and you can clearly see the skeletal system of the creature. However, these necromorphs are extremely agile, and they also move a lot quicker than some of the others. The jaws stretch out of its mouth, giving it an outworldish look, and the human hands mutate into sharp talons. It uses these sharp talons to hack and slash at its victims, and the feeder is a force to reckon with when it's present in a large group. These creatures are not particularly fond of light, and they depend on sound to detect their victims. You can easily walk slowly and throw things around to distract a feeder. It's also possible to slip past one of these without bothering to use your ammo at all. They aren't much of a threat individually, but beware of a ferocious group that wants to slash your head off. Infector. Imagine a headless, mutated bat, and that is probably the closest resemblance we have for an infector necromorph. They're formed from a human torso and legs, and the wings are basically a flap of skin fused between the host's broken legs. The head has a projecting proboscis that is used to infect new hosts. The victim is first enveloped within its wings, and then injected with fluid from the proboscis. These creatures can also impale victims right through their forehead. These necromorphs prefer the corpses that already have head wounds because they don't have to crack the skull open to inject it. You will also come across some of the enhanced infectors in the course of the game. A good way to deal with them is to rely on their predictability. If you ever spot an area with a few dead bodies, you can expect one of these to pop up. You simply have to cut off the infector proboscis or just shoot it to death. LURKER. This is a necromorph that specializes in ranged attacks. These creatures are created from human babies and organ banks that are used in various biological procedures. Even infected dogs can result in a LURKER. It looks like a lump of biomass with a particularly creepy head. This necromorph has 3 barbed tentacles growing out of its back, and they don't need to get close to the victim to attack. They shoot projectiles at their targets from quite a distance, and their sharp tentacles can also be a handy weapon. The LURKER is a dangerous enemy because it has adapted itself to low-gravity combat, and we loved the canine version of LURKER seen in Dead Space 3. It's not that difficult to avoid a LURKER if you keep moving because you can avoid their barbs. However, it is advisable to keep an eye out for these necromorphs because they can be quite tough to spot. Twitcher. The Twitchers are a variant of the Slasher necromorphs, and they look very similar to the Slasher. There are, however, a few differences: the larger talons, muscular bodies, and paler skin. These creatures are supremely fast, and they resulted from a necromorph infection that was converting the corpses of soldiers and security personnel at the site. Their speed and quick reaction time makes them hard to dodge, and in the higher difficulty levels, they even see your attacks and move away. These monstrosities walk on their human legs, and their sharp talons on both arms can rip apart the victims. There are quite a few variants of the Twitcher that you'll come across, and during the game it is wise to keep an eye on them because these creatures can fake their deaths. Even a legless Twitcher is very fast, and you would do well to keep as much distance between you and this necromorph. Divider. These are tall and thin necromorphs, and they have the ability to break into several smaller creatures. The mutation makes the major organs fall out and the limbs become elongated and slender. These creatures have fingers fused together to form sharp claws, and there is a gaping hole in the torso. They have a long, tongue-like appendage which can be used to decapitate victims. The claws are a deadly weapon as well, and it's quite a challenge when a divider splits into smaller necromorphs. If you manage to deliver significant damage to this creature, it will pretend to collapse, and the arms and legs soon separate into independent creatures. The head tries to attach itself to a new host, and it's important to destroy the head. We remember these necromorphs for their eerie, loud sounds, and you'll come across various versions of these creatures in all the Dead Space games. Pregnant. The resemblance with a slasher is hard to miss. These are a species of specialized necromorphs, and they have enormous sacs coming out of their abdominal area. This gets them their unique name, and this sac contains smaller necromorphs. It's created from one human corpse, and the mutation causes the lower jaw to be detached. Pregnant has tentacles hanging from the mouth, and it has two massive arms ending in a sharp scythe. Their blades are used to rip apart their prey, and they can also release their spawns to fight off their victims. In Dead Space 3, the pregnant necromorphs appear to be a lot bigger and more swollen. You can either sever both its blades and shoot the creature before it releases the payload. It's important to keep a safe distance because in close quarters, this hideous beast will be quite a handful. Leaper. You've probably seen these necromorphs in all the Dead Space games. The mutations cause the fingers to grow into bladed claws, and the ribcage seems to be turned inside out. Even the legs are fused together to form a tail-like appendage, and the creature has sharp teeth that can be used to bite the victim. The Leapers get their name because of their ability to leap at their prey, and they can cover surprising distances even in zero gravity. These creatures are quite agile and fast, and the tail allows them to conduct the powerful jumps. The Leapers also have an enhanced form where they are darker in color with glowing eyes. These variants are stronger than the normal ones. During the gameplay, you have to be alert in poorly lit areas because it's tough to spot the creature lurking around. It is quite a hardy opponent because you'll have to cut off one arm and then shoot it in its head to kill the monster. Even then, the near-dead creature keeps clawing at Issac, and this morbid beast is one of the deadlier necromorphs encountered during the game. The Creeper. The Creeper is a slug-like mass of decaying tissue, and it has an insatiable hunger that requires a constant supply of prey. Anything that comes near it is consumed quickly, and even the other necromorphs are not safe. The Creeper doesn't have a fixed form, but you can see the dissolved bones and a human skull inside the body. The mode of attack is also an interesting one because it tends to dissolve and incorporates all organic matter that comes in contact. This creature and its actions will remind you of the all-consuming nature of the Blob. Their weakness seems to be fire, and it's not known for sure how to get rid of these creatures.
Life itself. Now it's time to play your part.
The Hunter. The Regenerator-type necromorph was biologically engineered by inserting a necrotic tissue into one of the crew members. The Hunter looks very similar to the Slasher, but they are larger in size. It's noticeably bulkier and even grows taller than the Slasher. Its regenerative abilities are superior to some of the other necromorphs, and it can grow its limbs back in seconds. Another noticeable difference in the Hunter was the deep, throaty voice, which was not like the screaming of the Slasher. It had glowing eyes and the toes enlarged into sharp claws. When you encounter the Hunter, you have to figure out ways to slow it down using the environment. Once you dismember the creature, you must put it in stasis when the limbs start growing back, and this will buy you enough time to flee. The Slug. The Slug is a giant necromorph, which is the boss of the 8th level of Dead Space. It had 5 tentacles, similar to that of the Leviathan, and in order to defeat the monster, you can use the anti-asteroid cannons. The Slug uses the powerful tentacles to throw objects at the victim, and you have to destroy all the 5 tentacles to defeat the creature. Each tentacle has a yellow bulbous mass, which is the weak point of the appendage. This creature has some kind of a face, but you can hardly see it with the cannon blocking the view. Since the full body of the Leviathan is never seen, it's possible that the Slug is some form of that. Initially, the creature doesn't attack until fired upon, but once it does, there is no stopping the carnage. You can use the things that the Slug throws you to avoid significant damage. For instance, the gas canisters thrown can be shot down before it damages the tower. Necromorph. This Necromorph gets its name from the nameless alien species that it was created from. It stands tall at 7 to 8 feet, and these strong beasts are similar to the brute variants of the Necromorphs. Their tall, skeletal appearance has 2 appendages from the chest, and the head is a bony structure. The stomach cavity of this Necromorph has crawler Necromorphs that are unleashed if the enemy gets too close. They are quite aggressive and charge towards the players, and their punch is powerful enough to knock out the victim. Their high-pitched whistling sound is one of the disturbing things that will haunt you during the game. The crawlers are smaller in size, but they swarm the enemy and explode, causing heavy damage. We found stasis to be quite useful while fighting these creatures, and the high-damage weapons can also come in handy. There are always more of these Necromorphs lurking around, so while encountering one, be sure to conserve your ammo and stasis. MEDUSA. MEDUSA is only seen in zero-gravity environments, and this Necromorph has a lot of similarities with the nest. It deserves the name because of its grotesque looks, and the yellowish tinge only enhances its horrible nature. It looks like a giant floating bulbous sac, and it has powerful tentacles emerging from its body. It's mobile, unlike the nest, and MEDUSA is in every way more advanced. When you face them, the best thing to do is avoid these monsters. They can fire projectiles targeted towards you, and it is suggested that you take them out in long-ranged attacks before they can attack. Their melee attack is also quite deadly, and avoiding them will also help you conserve ammo. When it kills Issac or Carver, it rips apart their bodies with its tentacles. Tentacle. Most of the Necromorphs encountered in Dead Space have some kind of tentacles, so it's not surprising to have one that simply resembles a giant, thick tentacle. They can be an individual species, or they can serve as the arms and limbs for other large Necromorphs such as Leviathan. They are also seen as stationary Necromorphs, and they have an elephant-like roar that can be heard from great distances. The tentacle has a powerful pull, and it can drag its prey into its lair. Their massive weight also makes a strong impact when it rams onto the victim. The drag tentacles will give Issac just enough time to aim at their weak spots, and the right weapon will do the trick if you have a good aim. Various forms of these monstrosities have to be dealt with in the course of the gameplay, and you can always choose to avoid them to spare yourself all the trouble. Brethren Moon. The Brethren Moon are believed to be the final stage in the life cycle of a Necromorph. These space-faring monsters are one of the primary villains in the Dead Space franchise, and they're the source of the Marcus signal. Historically, these moon-sized Necromorphs have spread throughout the universe, and they have a solitary purpose: to consume all of organic life. These are the largest Necromorphs encountered in the franchise, and their insane tentacles can reach up to thousands of miles. They can communicate telepathically, and these sentient beings have no empathy whatsoever. They seek out a host world, and the marker remains dormant until the host world has a certain level of technological advancement. These creatures are almost gods of the Necromorph world, and they can devour entire worlds. Brethren Moons have been seen time and again in several Dead Space games, and they have easily been the hardest to deal with. Brute. The Brute is the Hulk among the Necromorphs, and it probably gets its name because of its brute strength. This gigantic Necromorph is made up of several human corpses, and it's encased in an armored exoskeleton. In place of the chest, the Brutes have a sack full of explosive material, and the moment its limbs are severed, it bursts out the fluid. The muscular appearance and great size do not slow down this monster, and it's fairly agile. They are also stealthy attackers, and they can take down their prey all of a sudden. Their strong armor and incredible strength make them a formidable enemy, and their powerful punches are a serious threat. Their explosive organic bombs can also prove to be lethal. There are several variants of the Brute, and you have to use the flamethrower to have a chance against this Necromorph. Hit their weakest spots with the most powerful weapons, or you'll be dead in a matter of seconds. Nest. When a female host is fused with another body, the nest is formed. It has fleshy, bulbous arms, and the lower part of its body is fused into a mass of flesh. This acts as an anchor for the nest to a surface, and in this regard it has a few similarities with the Guardian. Just like a Guardian, if you want to kill a nest, you have to destroy the arms. Their lower body acts as armor for them, and without any threat around, they remain concealed to be protected. They don't possess any short-range attacks, and once again their lower part acts as the armor when threatened. However, these Necromorphs can launch projectiles from its tentacles towards its target. The detonator comes in handy while dealing with a nest, and a fully upgraded javelin gun is also useful. Commander. When the first Dead Space game was being developed, several Necromorph prototypes were being proposed. The Commander was one of them, and it was planned that this Necromorph would be used as a mini-boss. The characteristics of the Commander were supposed to be similar to the Brute, but eventually the idea was scrapped. The concept art shows the Commander as a spider-like creature with a glowing body. This could have been a welcome change from the usual designs you see in Necromorphs, with all the tentacles and bulbous structures. The corruption. If there is a Necromorph outbreak, there has to be a few pervasive signs, and the corruption is one of the sure-shot ones. The corruption is active only in the presence of a marker signal, and it's about 70% human. It seeks any biological matter to grow, and once it starts spreading, the intact corpses become combat-oriented Necromorphs. Imagine this Necromorph to be more like a bacteria, and it is a massive Necromorph tissue. It has the unique ability to turn oxygen in the air to a toxic gas that makes the environment unsuitable for living organisms. The corruption infects dead cells, and it starts to multiply at a rapid rate. The outbreaks are fast and effective, but it hasn't been seen to affect living tissues. During an outbreak, the corruption provides the support to convert the local atmosphere into something hostile for life. We saw an interesting appearance of the corruption in Dead Space Aftermath, where it was shown to have tentacles that could be used to strangle a victim. Crawler. This is the most morbid infant that you can imagine. The Crawler is a strange Necromorph that is formed from human and alien infants. These reanimated, mutated infants retain a deformed infant face, and their torso is unusually enlarged. It contains a certain type of organic explosive that can blow up when required. The Crawler moves around in a way that the sack is always pointed upward. The back legs are fused together, and its movements are somewhat caterpillar-like. It launches suicidal attacks and self-detonates if you're caught in the immediate blast radius. There is no escape. However, these are weak creatures, and if you keep a safe distance, they're hardly a threat. It's not tough to wipe out entire groups of crawlers because of their silly habit of stumbling over and tripping against each other. Creeper and Shambler. They have one of the most human appearances among all Necromorphs. Except for the skeletal head, the entire structure resembles that of a human. The Shambler is simply a variant of the Divider, and the Creeper is the head of the Divider. The Creeper heads can mutilate dead bodies, and after they burrow into the neck stumps, Shamblers are created. They're spawned from dead soldiers, and thus they have access to firearms. Even though the Shamblers have firearms in their arms, the good thing about them is that they have a lousy aim. When a Shambler is threatened, it allows the Creeper out and tosses it at the player. You have to dodge it and then use the confusion to kill it. There is another easy way out. You can simply take a shot at the head, and both the Shambler and the controlling Creeper would be killed. CYST. The cysts are basically the first stage of growth after the corruption stage, and these are stationary Necromorphs. They were seen in Dead Space 2, and if the victim is within its reach, the cyst attacks. The method of attack is similar to some of the weaker Necromorphs. It releases organic bombs that explode upon impact. However, their intelligence is questionable because they can't distinguish between the humans and the Necromorphs. Anything that comes within its range will be attacked by one of the explosives, and this makes them fairly capable of defending an area. It's not the toughest job in the gameplay to deal with a cyst. You can just walk around it slowly, and just as the cyst releases the explosive, you can run ahead to avoid it. There are also a few tricks that allow you to kill the cyst without even attacking it directly. The Pack. Just as the name suggests, the Pack comprises of a group of Necromorphs. These creatures use their large numbers to put down their target, and they have been created from the bodies of children. It is not like the Pack is made up of individuals because they act as a collective force. Very rarely will you find one of these alone. The Pack shows very few signs of mutation because they're made out of undamaged adolescent corpses. They have enhanced strength, and these Necromorphs can dismember their victims quite easily with their hands that are shaped like sharp talons. The Pack is not a force to reckon with unless they have the advantage of numbers. For this reason, they always attack together, and the victims are overwhelmed by a vicious attack from all directions. Their childlike shrieks are petrifying, and their collective clawing at the prey can have devastating effects. The use of status proves to be very effective, and it buys you time to find a strong position to eliminate them all. The pods are not so dangerous without the strength of numbers. These are usually found in larger groups, and in such a scenario they can deliver a serious damage. These necromorphs have a small embryo-shaped body, and they are ejected by the guardian necromorphs as their self-defense mechanism. The pods have a tentacle that they can extend to fling projectiles at the player. It is tough to make out features in the body of a pod, but you can figure out the distorted mouth and eyes. They contain an explosive material that bursts out once the tentacles are severed. Wherever a guardian is located, you can expect to find one of these swarming you. The gameplay treats them more as a small nuisance than a major threat, but if Issac is low on health, they can be quite lethal. PUKER, Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3 became a lot scarier because of the presence of this unique species of necromorph. Their appearance is terribly mutated due to the digestive acids corroding their flesh. The legs of the host are entwined and the fingers have shaped into long claws. The creature appears to be eyeless and the jaw is fused with the neck, which gives it a look of constant screaming. You can see through the body because of its horrifying mutilations, and the yellowish lungs are quite visible. The developers provided the PUKER with one of the most disturbing vocals, and the gurgling and choking sound is simply haunting. The creature is fast and charges the player to unleash an acid bath. If you get hit by the corrosive liquid sprayed by the PUKER, you can't run, and the creature then uses its claws to rip you apart. The enhanced variants have glowing eyes, and irrespective of the type of PUKER you encounter, it's best to keep a safe distance. They don't have any weak spots as such, which can be hit by Issac, and thus the best way to go about defeating them is to rip them apart. Regenerator. These necromorphs are a type of slasher, and they get their name from their ability to regenerate lost limbs in seconds. They apparently have unlimited biomass, which allows them to perform their regenerative abilities. They're not unusually tall, but all the regenerative necromorphs are taller than Issac. They have blade-like limbs, and their muscular appearance allows them to throw him around easily. While it is quite challenging to deal with this threat, an easy way out can be to burn the entire creature to dust. They can also regenerate their heads, and thus you can't afford to give them a chance. They look very similar to the slashers, except for their larger size, and the sharp blades of the regenerator can be used to hack away at its victims. The worst thing that you can do when faced with this necromorph is to pointlessly waste your ammo while trying to take down the arms and limbs. Enhanced necromorphs. It's never clearly explained in the games as to why some of the necromorphs are enhanced. It's assumed that the enhanced necromorphs have a much stronger infection, and you will find these creatures in all the Dead Space games. While they are a sub-breed of the necromorph infection, they retain all the basic attacks and characteristics of their basic form. They're simply just much stronger, and they have greater health. You'll need to sever more number of limbs to defeat them, but other than that, there isn't much of a difference from their normal variants. You can tell them by the color, which is either black or dark green, and they have glowing yellow eyes. They are tough to spot in the surroundings because their dark skin tone allows them to blend in effortlessly. Exploder. The nature of the Exploder is very similar to that of the Crawlers. They act as suicide bombers, and they contain an explosive chemical substance in their large, glowing pustule. These necromorphs are created from a single human host, and the two halves of the host's head serve as jaws. At the end of its arms lies the large pustule, and any blunt force will trigger an explosion. They have a clumsy walk because the weight of the left arm is a lot more due to the pustule. Whenever the victim is in its range, the exploder will let go of the pustule, resulting in an explosion. If you happen to be within the blast radius, you're done for because the strength of the blast can dismember humans. Thankfully, they're not very fast, and due to their clear weaknesses, they always attack in large groups. It's also very easy to detect their presence because of their large cackling sound. In Dead Space 3, the developers made the Exploder a lot faster, and it became a lot deadlier than before. As you've probably guessed already, you can eliminate the danger by attacking from a safe distance. Flyer. This winged necromorph can fly around, and the Flyer is a surprise threat that attacks from above. They've only been seen in Dead Space Extraction, and these necromorphs are rather uncommon. They don't appear frequently in the course of the game, and they don't pose much of a danger as well. Their body structure is similar to that of the Infector and the Leaper, and their shape can be compared to that of a stingray. Their facial features are deformed beyond recognition, and their jaw is split into two. Usually, you'll see these in smaller numbers, and they just fly past the player in order to distract them. The attacks of the Flyer are restricted to slashing at the player with their sharp tail. They dive on their target at great speed, and it becomes a bit tricky to shoot these dive bomber-like creatures down. When you're fighting a Flyer, patience is your best friend. Instead of trying to shoot the creature from a large distance, you should wait till it approaches closer. FLYTRAP. This Necromorph was supposed to be the standard enemy in Dead Space 2. You never got to see it because the idea was dropped at the last minute. The appearance of this creature was quite interesting. The designs look like a human body suspended from the ceiling by his hands and feet. The frontal skin is completely ripped off, and the inner organs hang outside in a grotesque mutilation. Their activities were supposed to be similar to the Guardian in many ways. For instance, their main job was to lure the player and attack all of a sudden when he was in its range. Its tentacle can be released to attack the player when he gets too close. While all these were quite intriguing, the final product seen in the game included quite a few spirited changes. The Spider. We don't get to see a significant portion of its body, but it is safe to say that the Spider is one of the largest Necromorphs that you encounter in the Dead Space franchise. The armor on the visible part of the Spider's body is covered in thick armor, and direct fire does this creature no damage whatsoever. This Necromorph has 2 large arms and 2 large tentacles, although other appendages are plentiful. Some of these are used to walk around, and the creature can use its tube-like mouth to grab the victims. The Spider also houses leapers in sacs inside its tentacle, and when these burst out, the creature is even more dangerous. The 2 strong arms of the Spider resemble scorpion tails, and the pulse rifle can be a handy weapon while fighting one of these beasts. Spitter. In Dead Space 2, the slashers created from female hosts were called the Spitters. They get their unique name because of their ability to spit acid on their victims from a distance. This is also something that differentiates the male and female slashers. Just like their male counterparts, the Spitter has large bladed arms that protrude from their shoulders. They have green-toned uniforms, and their mutations are not that extreme as compared to some of the others. Their head is ripped from the body and is connected to a new neck. They are hardly much of a problem if they are a safer distance away. In Dead Space 3, we came across the deadliest version of the Spitter. When they get in close combat, they use their blades to slash at Issac, or try to grab him. It's capable of biting his head off, and at times these solitary Necromorphs are also seen alongside others. You should try to shoot its head off, and this will remove the ability to spit acid completely. FODDER. Very few Necromorphs have shown enough smartness to have a strategy behind their attacks, but FODDER is one of them. It looks like a regular human, and it even retains the clothing of the host to fool their victims. The sounds that they emit also resemble distorted human speech. You can see a ghastly yellow light in their mouth, and their slime-oozing eyes add to their morbid looks. The glowing mouth stops when the creature is dismembered. Even the methods of attacking their prey are different from the other Necromorphs. Instead of going for attacks using their mutated limbs, the FODDER uses proper weapons like ice axes and bone saws to slaughter their target. If sufficient damage is done to them, the mutations are triggered rapidly. The tentacles are revealed, and the creature shows its true Necromorph form concealed within. In order to defeat the FODDER Necromorph, you have to blow off one of its arms and then sever a leg. They can split into 2, and aiming at the leg with heavy weapons does the trick. Split Face. The Split Face has exhibited multiple appearances in different encounters, but the basic structure remains the same. It has 2 heads and 7 bladed legs. There is a black pustule on the underside of its body, and the main body of the creature is composed of human torsos. We've also seen the creature with a body covered in spikes. These spikes can be launched to attack its prey, and just like the Divider, this Necromorph can launch its head after the victim. The black pustule could explode, and this feature will remind you of the Exploder. It had a combination of features that seemed to be many of the Necromorph species combined into one. Even though Splitface was vulnerable to dismemberments, we didn't see the creature die until it was shot. STALKER. These Necromorphs are so altered and mutated that you will hardly find any human resemblance. It looks like a deformed T-Rex, and the arms of this creature are equipped with long, sharp talons. They can impale or stab their victims instead of slashing at them like some of the other Necromorphs. The only traces of the human skull are in the massive, eyeless, 3-pronged head. The head of the creature can withstand dismemberment, and the Stalker is easily among the smartest Necromorphs. The Stalkers attack in groups too, and there is a well-devised strategy to bring down the victim. After their quick attacks, they flee before the victim can fight back. Their methodical attacks mean that they even take turns attacking their victim, and their enhanced variant is simply a nightmare for the player. We found sprinting past the Stalker's area to be a smart move, and if you have to fight them directly, impaling them proves useful. Swarm. In Dead Space 3, the Infector and Swarmer Necromorphs are replaced by the Swarm. True to its name, these creatures are present in large swarms, and their structure is similar to that of an arachnid. This spider-like small necromorph is useful when it comes to rushing for the nearest corpse and reanimating it. The corpse is then transformed into a fodder or a slasher, and adds value to the necromorph army. If you don't deal with this threat quickly enough, you might find yourself at the receiving end of a combined attack by various necromorphs. The swarm almost works like clockwork, and the moment their host body is destroyed, they rush to take another corpse. Dismembering the corpses before the swarm can reanimate it can be a smart strategy. These necromorphs don't usually attack alone, and it's suggested to eliminate the threat before it can reanimate a corpse. Swarmer. These tiny, fleshy creatures are made up of reanimated bits of flesh, and their only strength is in their numbers. They're usually found residing within the pregnant necromorphs, and their attack comprises of a sudden aggression in large numbers. They can lunge collectively at their victims and start biting their prey vigorously. They come out when the pregnant stomach is ruptured, and rarely will you see them in independent groups. These creatures try and latch onto Issac, and if many of them get onto him, it'll drain his health very quickly. While the swarmer may not seem much of a threat, it is still quite deadly in this regard and has the capability of killing Issac. They are fast, and they can jump around to avoid getting hit. You can choose a shot of status to slow down an entire swarm and then kill them softly. Swinger. This is another of those necromorphs that were designed for Dead Space but eventually scrapped. The Swinger had an interesting structure, with the main body and tail comprised of 2 tentacles. This tail would allow the creature to swing from ceilings, and if the tail was severed, it'd fall to the ground. Upon impact, the Swinger would split into 2 and it would start chasing the player using its limbs. It was also supposed to have the ability to spit out corrosive acid towards its enemy. This necromorph looked more like a deadly insect mutant and had no resemblance to the human body whatsoever. The developers omitted the creature because of budgetary constraints and the lack of time. Grabber. The Grabber consisted of a normal human corpse that was slightly damaged. It mutated into a stretchable head that could be extended far to latch onto the player. The designs were not considered for Dead Space, but various forms of this necromorph were seen in the franchise. The Grabbers were seen in Dead Space Extraction, and they generally had a smaller size. It uses its extendable head to grab the body of the victim and then brings it close to their body. Their body has a sharp blade, which once used to be the spine of the host, and this is used to kill the player. The weakest spot of the Grabber is its head, and aiming at the head with precision weapons will be more than enough. Graverobber. With a bear-like stance and 3 jawless heads, this monstrosity is one of the most disturbing necromorphs that we would have seen. However, due to time constraints, the design was never put to use in the short animated film entitled Dead Space Downfall. The upper body of the creature is composed of dead bodies, and some of these bodies have been absorbed into the flesh of the creature. Graverobbers have sharp blades like the slashers, and they have a long, fleshy tongue coming out of the central head. The body is covered in armor, and these vicious creatures devour dead bodies in seconds. This simply adds to their massive biomass, and the Graverobbers could have been a curious addition to the franchise. The Boss. This is the final necromorph that you'll encounter in Dead Space Mobile, and this creature is easily among the most disgusting necromorphs. The Boss is massive, and it has 4 tentacles. 2 of these tentacles are used to attack the prey, while the other 2 hold the creature steady. The creature has a long spiked tongue, and it can be used to hit the victim. It can also attack like a lurker and shoot blades from its arms. The Boss can fire projectiles from its tentacles, and thus it can handle both long-range and short-range combat. When the tongue smashes into the target, there's little you can do. However, the Boss does have a few weak spots on its body, and you can work your way to exploit them. This necromorph is so mutated that the resemblance with humans is hard to find. At least 10 corpses were required to put this giant together, and the only way you can defeat this monster is to hit the weak spots before it's too late. The Bully. The Bully retained the bipedal human structure even after the mutation process. The 2 arms ended in sharp blades, and the face got elongated into a long jaw. This necromorph had sharp teeth and looked as powerful as some of the toughest ones you've seen. The Bully was supposed to be a part of Dead Space 2, and even though the concept art was ready, it was finally rejected. It is suggested that this creature would be similar to that of a Regenerator, and they would also have the same animations. The Nexus. This large alien necromorph is a variant of the hive mind, and it serves as the commanding force for the lesser necromorph species. It can broadcast the signals of the markers telepathically, and thus the Nexus is crucial in coordinating infestations. In Dead Space 3, you'll find Issac dealing with several Nexus forms, and many of these were initially frozen. The nerve clusters have to be activated so that the alien machine can be tracked down. Only the upper body of this massive crustacean-like beast is shown. One of the host bodies was of some alien species, and the Nexus has 4 limbs to attack the victim. The creature has a mantis-like head, and inside the mandibles, the creature has large claws and pustules. Just like the hive mind in Dead Space, there's a large glowing sac inside the chest cavity. These creatures can either suck their victims inside their mouth or smash them completely. They're also capable of shooting red pustule projectiles that explode upon impact. The only escape from the Nexus is to shoot the yellow spots on its mandibles while it tries to suck in the victim. The rapid-fire weapons might be a good idea, and firing at the mouth's pustules can prove effective. The Snow Beast. You've probably seen this monstrous necromorph during the events of Dead Space 3. The Snow Beast is gigantic, and multiple human corpses led to this massive structure. It could also be the mutations of some indigenous creature of the planet. This necromorph looks like a crab-spider hybrid, and there are a few similarities with the giant crab in the first Dead Space. The creature has long tentacles, and the fast tongue can nab its prey in the wink of an eye. The back tentacles have some yellow tissues, and this is a vulnerable spot for the creature. The Snow Beast does have regenerative abilities, but if you shoot at these tentacles, a secondary set appears. It shows signs of intelligence because this necromorph will run away once it's too injured. The Snow Beast has a tendency to charge at the player, and large objects in your immediate surroundings will form a protective barrier against the creature. If you're planning to target the weak points in the tentacles, the rivet shotgun can be a handy weapon. The Tormentor. It was 3 times the size of a brute, and also as powerful as any of the other necromorph species. The Tormentor had multiple limbs of various sizes, and they can be used according to the requirements. These limbs can be used to move around or for attacking purposes, and the Tormentor is made up of several corpses. The large fanged mouth looks hideous with the pincers on the front, and this necromorph is strong enough to smash the victims using its arms. The mouth can rip the victim apart, and this terrifying entity was encountered in Dead Space 2. The fight between Issac and the Tormentor was a memorable one, and the only weak spot of this monster that we remember is the glowing yellow tissue near the shoulder joint. The UBERMORPH. This is a regenerator-type necromorph, and this tall, bipedal creature looks similar to a slasher. However, the characteristics of this creature resemble the hive mind more than the slasher. It has a short, stiff neck connecting its body to the head, and the bulky upper body is powered by some strong arms. Claw-like appendages emerge from the abdominal region, and the 2 large arms end in 3 sharp claws. The creature can use this to slash and mutate its victims. The UBERMORPH has a special quality, where it can rapidly regenerate the lost tissues and bones. This makes it very difficult to kill this necromorph, and in this regard it shares a few similarities with the Hunter. Not much is explained about the origin of this creature, and many are of the opinion that this creature is in the early stage of a hive mind's life cycle. In the gameplay, the UBERMORPH has to be treated in a similar fashion as the Hunter. Dismember it completely, and half your worries are over. Tripod. The male tripod is a leaper-like creature, and it has large arms to be used both for attacks and mobility. The female tripod, which is less encountered, has pale skin and uses its tongue like a tentacle to decapitate its victims. These necromorphs are made up of several human corpses, and they're known to be extremely aggressive. The male tripod is as big as a brute, and he only dies when both his arms are dismembered. The female tripod is also formed from several corpses, and standing still near a tripod is as good as suicide. You should continue moving around, and the flamethrower is an excellent weapon of choice against this necromorph. Tripod's nest. This is simply a large form of the corruption that was formed into a nest. It was supposed to accommodate the tripod, and Issac faced the nest while he was exploring the facility. He had to destroy the nest and the tripods before moving ahead. This was a crucial part of Dead Space 2 and a stiff challenge for the player. Infection. This is the bacterial microorganism that is responsible for the creation of the necromorphs. They may not have a direct role in the games, but they're present in all of them. In fact, the infection is one of the most important parts of the story, and it resembles a bacteria. It is transmitted when open wounds come into contact, but it does not mutate a living organism. For this reason, Issac never turns into a necromorph after being attacked by so many. The infection can spread only under the marker's effect, and if the marker is destroyed, so will the bacteria. The Urchin. In Dead Space Extraction, you'll encounter two major bosses, and one of them is the Urchin. It has a mysterious origin, but there are a few noticeable similarities with the SLUG and the LEVIATHAN. The main body is somewhat formless, and there are multiple tentacles surrounding the body. It's found in one of the water purification facilities, and the Urchin spends a lot of its time being submerged. The yellow orbs in both tentacles are the weak spots to shoot at, and watch out for the secondary tentacles once the primary tentacles are severed. The idea of an aquatic necromorph dragging the prey to its mouth and devouring it was quite intimidating, and this gruesome beast could also lash out at its victims with the tentacles. Weezer. The mutations in the Weezer are minimal, and they still retain many features of their human host. They seem to be in a permanent kneeling position, and they're not capable of any movement. These necromorphs are not a threat directly, but they can generate and exhale poisonous gases. Thus, it's important for you to get rid of these creatures before you can gain access to certain places. Independently, these creatures are almost harmless, but they can drain the oxygen from a room, and that is their indirect offensive capability. Isaac must take care of this threat before he suffocates to death. Such a wide variety of necromorphs ensured that the Dead Space franchise was immortalized. There are some underlying similarities about these creatures, but some unique features in almost every kind of necromorph made things very exciting for the player. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.